Okay guys, I don't want to be too harsh, I don't want to prolong this video for too much. I want to go straight to the point, so let's go. Imagine, okay, that you have Devil May Cry 5, okay, but suddenly they release a Devil May Cry 6 where you don't have the mission, the structure of missions anymore. You don't have the score anymore. And to start the new quest, you explore an open world, you get to a point, and then the quest starts. And you are still in the open world. You don't have the score system. You don't have the system that makes you unlock new powers. You just go around. You just have the same moves from the start to the end. And that's it. But they call it Devil May Cry 6. Okay? They call it Devil May Cry 6. And it has the same names of characters of Devil May Cry 6. Some weapons has the same names of Devil May Cry 5 Devil May Cry weapons. Some enemies have the same names of enemies of Devil May Cry. But the structure of the game, the core part, is not there anymore. You don't have the structure of missions that you select, you don't have the score system, you don't have the combos, but they call it Devil May Cry 6. In your opinion, is Devil May Cry 6 a Devil May Cry? Or is it another game that they decided to call Devil May Cry, hoping to sell some more copies of it? What's your opinion? This is what I think about Final Fantasy XVI. I think that Final Fantasy XVI is not necessarily a bad game. And maybe it doesn't mean that Final Fantasy is really dead. I mean, it's dead right now because we don't have a new Final Fantasy since a new good Final Fantasy since Final Fantasy 10 and 12, maybe. There is the Final Fantasy XIV that is online, but I'm talking about the main single player series. We don't have a good Final Fantasy, a good single player Final Fantasy, I don't know, since 15 years, maybe, or even more. And this is a problem. This is a real problem. Now I show you why. What's the core part of Final Fantasy? Because a lot of people are ranting about the fact that now the game is action, but the problem is not that the game is action. Because Final Fantasy VII Remake was almost an action game and it was fine. Was fine by that. But was fine because you were able to switch characters during the fight. You still had a party. Now I'll show you something, okay? Now I'll show you why Final Fantasy XVI is not a Final Fantasy. So we have this game here, okay? This video here, sorry. This shows some evolutions of Final Fantasy. There is one thing in common to all of these games. This is Final Fantasy II to Final Fantasy IV. These are some other extras. This is Final Fantasy VI. This is Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy VIII. Where is Final Fantasy VII? This is Final Fantasy VII. Okay, this is an image where there is just Cloud. What's in common of all of these games? This is Final Fantasy X. This is Final Fantasy X too, that a lot of people hates, but still has something in common with the others. Let's go ahead. Let's not talk about spin-offs, okay? We are not talking about spin-offs. This is Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 13 are the same thing too. What I'm talking about is the darn party. This is why every Final Fantasy up to Final Fantasy 15 are actually Final Fantasies. Like Final Fantasy 15, maybe it's not a good game. In my opinion, it's even a very bad game. But I can say that it's a Final Fantasy It's a very bad Final Fantasy game, but it's still a Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy XVI, maybe it's not such a bad game. It's not as bad as Final Fantasy XV, but it's not a Final Fantasy anymore. Because it doesn't matter that you give the title Final Fantasy, that you give names to monsters, etc. I don't give a fuck about the Eidolons, about the spells. I don't care. I don't care. You can make a Final Fantasy without Eidolons, and I'm fine. What makes a Final Fantasy is the fact that you have a party. The party ends a journey that usually involves the entire world. And during this journey, the characters usually grow. They experience a lot of things, they grow. And you grow with them. You grow with them. That's what the Final Fantasy is. In Final Fantasy XVI, since you just control one character, this game is not a Final Fantasy anymore. Because if you're not able to control more characters, if you're not able to strategize the little bit, the minimum possible, by switching characters, by having some builds, by watching the characters interact. If in Final Fantasy XVI you were able to control more characters at once, like by switching from one to another, like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy XVI would have been the reborn of Final Fantasy for real. I would have bought a PlayStation 5 to play this game as fast as possible. Would have been very, very happy. But it's not like this. I'm not interested in playing just one character against a lot of HP sponges, because you just waste a lot of time clicking buttons, mashing buttons in fights that are crazy easy, but with enemies that have a lot of HP. It's boring. And this is not something I'm saying myself. This is something a lot of reviewers are saying in every review, or at least people that are sincere, that are talking for real, without lying to themselves. Because this game has problems, and if you were able to switch between characters, the game would have been much crazy better. But Final Fantasy XVI is not an RPG anymore, like at all. It's just an action game with one character. That's not what Final Fantasy is. Final Fantasy is a journey between more characters. This is the problem. This is why Final Fantasy Lightning Returns is not a Final Fantasy. Because you only control this garbage character here. This is not a Final Fantasy. This is what Final Fantasy is supposed to be. A lot of characters, different stories, interacting through them, growing, and giving emotions to you. Letting you experience something that goes deep into you. I want to complete this first video with talking about something that makes me a little mad. Like, I heard people saying that this Final Fantasy is more serious, has darker tones, is more mature. Why? Because the character is cringe and edgy? You think that's mature? That's serious? That's darkest? Oh, the fuck, can this game be darker than whatever other Final Fantasy? In every Final Fantasy, from 1st to 9 to 10 to 11 to 12 to 13 to 15, in every Final Fantasy you talk about mass genocide, entire cities destroyed, child that becomes without parents, that have no parents anymore, child that dies. In Final Fantasy IX, one of the characters, it's a kid that is around 9 years old. And at a point he knows that he will die in around less than a year. And he has to live with this thing in his mind, think that his life as a count, he will not live for 10 years, 20 years, he will live for just around 1 year. And he has to deal with it. The other characters have to deal with it. You have to interact. They need to try to make him feel good. They need to try to give him a purpose on his life, on his short life. And I heard people saying that Final Fantasy XVI has the best story of every Final Fantasy. Are you fucking crazy? How the fuck is possible? Edgelord 16 has better story than something like this. Are you mad? So every Final Fantasy talks about death, about life, about friendship, about hate, about mental issues, about trying to overcome weaknesses, about trying to become a better person, about trying to redeem himself, about the fucking life, the fucking humanity. Final Fantasy is much more. And I don't know, maybe I don't really know the story of Final Fantasy XVI deeply, okay? Because I didn't spoil anything. But it's hard to say that Final Fantasy XVI is better than previous Final Fantasies. You have no idea of how good previous Final Fantasy were. This is just the truth. Today developers have no idea. Today gamers have no idea. Just play Final Fantasy IX from the start to the end. Read the fucking dialogues. Your mind will blow up. Because it's too deep, so deep, that you're not even able to think about it. Okay? That, I repeat, maybe it's not as bad as Final Fantasy XV, but it's not a Final Fantasy. Thank you for watching. I'm no Jake. Maybe leave a like if you want, comment, we can have a chat. I stream almost every day on Twitch. Some League of Legends, some Zelda. And I will keep dreaming about getting a real Final Fantasy one day. Maybe 5 years from now. Maybe they give me an action game, but give me a fucking party. And I will be happy. Have a nice day. Bye bye.